Ajayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Ajayo Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradhari Jayo Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Ajayo Girivaradhari Jayo Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Dana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Avanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Ajayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Jayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Kunja Vihari Jayo Kunja Vihari Kunja Vihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Jagannath Jai Baladeva Jaya Subhadra. Jai Jagannath Jai Baladeva Jaya Subhadra. Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me. Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me. Jayo Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe. Vallabha Sri Radhe. Jayo Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe. Radha Vallabha Sri Radhe. Jayo Radhe Jayo Radhe Jayo Sri Radhe. Radhe Jayo Radhe Jayo Sri Radhe. Jaya Giri Govardhan 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 Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nimai Sundar, Jayo Sundar Nimai, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nimai Sundar, Jayo Sundar Nimai, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nimai Sundar, Jayo Sundar Nimai, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jayo Nimai Sundar, Jayo Sundar Nimai, Jayo Nitai Doyal, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Ranitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Srila Guru Deva. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Srila Guru Deva. Jaya Om Vishnupada Paramsa Parujagacharya Stotra Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder-Acharya Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder-Acharya Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namacharya Ardas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kundgiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Maya Purnavadip Dham Ki Jai, Ganatpuri Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samveta Bhaktan Karinam Sankarinam Vigni Ki Jai, Radha Vallabha. All glories to Hare Krishna, all glories to Hare Krishna, all glories to Hare Krishna, all glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Vasudeva. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Sravana Kirtanaha Hrudantastoihi Abhadrani Vidunnoti Suhrutsatam Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. So it's almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, established as an irrevocable fact. So today's verse for discussion, Canto 6, which is prescribed duties for mankind, Chapter 4, the Hamsa Guhya prayers, text 24. Okay. Na yasya sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. 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 Sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. Sakavasan samvasataha puresmin. Sakavasan samvasataha puresmin. Sakavasan samvasataha puresmin. Avasan samvasataha puresmin. Sakavasan samvasataha puresmin. Puresmin. Guno yata gunino vyakta dristises. No yata gunino vyakta dristises. Guno yata gunino vyakta dristises. Yata gunino vyakta dristites. Guno yata gunino vyakta dristites. Gunino vyakta dristites. Tasmai maheshasaya namaskaromi. Tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Tasmai maheshasaya namaskaromi. Shasaya namaskaromi. Tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Jaya namaskaro. Nayasya sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. Sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. Sakavasan samvasataha puresmin. Guno yata gunino vyakta dristites. Dristate tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Nayasya sakyam purusho vaisi sakyuhum. Sakhavasan samvasataha puresmin. Guno yata gunino vyakta dristes. Tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Nayasya sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. Sakhavasan samvasataha puresmin. Guno yata gunino vyakta driste. Tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Nayasya sakyam purusho vaiti sakyuhu. Tapan vasata puresmin. Takataro yakta driste. Tasmai maheshaya namaskaromi. Yeah, word-to-word meaning by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Na, not, yasya, whose, sakyam, fraternity, purushaha, the living entity, avaiti, knows, sakyuhu, of the Supreme Friend, sakha, the friend, vasan, living, samvasataha, of the one living with, pure, in the body, asmin, This gunaha, the object of sense perception, yatha, just like guninaha, of its respective sense organ, Vyaktadristehe, who oversees the material manifestation, Tasmai, on to him, Maha Ishaya, on to the Supreme Controller, Namaskaromi, I offer my obeisances. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As the sense objects, form, taste, touch, smell and sound cannot understand how the senses perceive them, so the conditioned soul, although residing in his body along with the super soul, cannot understand how the Supreme Spiritual Person, the Master of the material creation, directs his senses. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that Supreme Person who is the Supreme Controller. Purport. The individual soul and the Supreme Soul live together within the body. This is confirmed in the Upanishads by the analogy that two friendly birds live in one tree, while one bird eating the fruit of the tree and the other simply witnessing and directing. Although the individual living being who is compared to the bird that is eating is sitting with his friend, the Supreme Soul, the individual living being cannot see him. Actually, the Super Soul is directing the workings of his senses in the enjoyment of sense objects. But as these sense objects cannot see the senses, the conditioned soul cannot see the directing soul. So the conditioned soul has desires and the Supreme Soul fulfills them. But the conditioned soul is unable to see the Supreme Soul. Thus Prajapati Daksha offers his obeisances to the Supreme Soul, the Super Soul, even though unable to see him. Another example is given that although ordinary citizens work under the direction of the government, they cannot understand how they are being governed or what the government is. In this regard, Madhvacharya quotes the following verse from the Skanda Purana. Yata rajagna priyatvam tu bhritya vedena chatmanaha tata jivo na yat sakyam vettitasmai namostute. As the various servants in the different departments of big establishments cannot see the Supreme Managing Director under whom they are working, the conditioned souls cannot see the Supreme Friend sitting within their bodies. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme, who is invisible to our material eyes. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitamscha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has the form of Satchitananda Vigraha, transcendental bliss, knowledge and eternity. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Him who turned the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross mountains. Such is the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Sri Ye Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rushabhana Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataro Bischa Krupa Sindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Tri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As the sense objects, form, taste, touch, smell and sound cannot understand how the senses perceive them, so the conditioned soul, although residing in his body along with super soul, cannot understand how the supreme spiritual person, the master of the material creation, directs his senses. Let me offer my respectful obeisance unto that supreme person who is the supreme controller. So I was just reading this translation, then a thought flashed that although we live with our partners, the partner often says, you know me for the last so many years and yet you do not know me. So similarly here, the soul and supreme soul, they live together as the Upanishad says, but yet the soul does not know the supreme soul or does not know that the super soul exists. So a beautiful analogy is given by His Holiness Shivaram Swami Maharaj in this connection. He says that I'm observing this microphone, but the microphone does not understand me, does not see me. And he says, I can see the pillar, but the pillar does not see me. So something similar to that we find. Although the super soul exists along with the soul, still the soul does not know the super soul. Whatever activities the soul is able to perform, it's all sanctioned, approved, witnessed by the Supreme Soul. As the analogy is given, this is confirmed in the Upanishads by the analogy that two friendly birds live in one tree, one bird eating the fruit of the tree and the other simply witnessing and directing. Although the individual living being who is compared to the bird that is eating is sitting with his friend from the Supreme Friend, the Supreme Soul, the individual living being cannot see him. So the closest person or the closest personality who lives with the soul is the super soul. And where do they exist? Somewhere in the region of the heart. So it's not that the soul and super soul are attached to the heart, that when a heart transplantation takes place, they also move along with that. So they live somewhere in that region, and it is said that the 5 pranas, it's somewhere in the 5 pranas, they are the 5 forces, and it's said that if you try to represent mathematically each prana as a vector, I don't know, some of you who are from mathematical background, they understand the concept of a vector, and where these 5 vectors meet to neutralize each other, it's in that point that the soul exists. And the closest associate of the soul is the super soul. And yet, the soul does not see, does not understand. So this brings us to the point that is seeing that important? Because we find the concept of seeing is said as Sarvendriyanam Nainam Pradhanam. I think most of you must have heard this sentence, at least this is what I was told as a child. Sarva Indriyanam, of all the senses, Nainam, the eyes are important. And it's only through the eye that we can see the outside world. And therefore, that particular sense is given the importance. But from Vedic perspective, it does not mean that the rest of the senses are lowered or inferior. In fact, it is not the nainam, but it is the auditory sense which is important, and if it is coming through disciplic succession. if the message is received from the disciplic succession, that avarod panta, so we receive from in a bona fide sampradaya, then it is that knowledge given importance or cognizance. So here, it is not that the soul has to see the super soul, but the soul has to hear about the super soul. And hence we find here Daksha is offering Namaskaromi. Although Prabhupada said that the conditioned soul desires and the Supreme Soul fulfills, conditioned soul is unable to see the Supreme Soul. Thus Prajapati offers his obeisance to the Supreme Soul, the Super Soul, even though unable to see him. So it's not that he has to see him with the eyes, but we have to see him with the ears. So if we can see the Super Soul, who is so, by hearing from Guru Parampara in a bona fide sampradaya, the existence of the soul and how he directs our activity, then to that super soul, although I may not be able to see with my nainam, I can offer my obeisances, which is Namaskaromi. It's not only that the super soul exists along with the soul as is given in the analogy, but the soul also, super soul, exists in every atom, andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam. And yet, and it said that, I think in one of the purports, Srila Prabhupada in Bhagavad Gita said that not only the super soul exists along with the soul, but he also exists within the soul. Anyone remembers which verse Prabhupada gives that purport? Not only the super soul exists along with the soul, but the super soul exists in the soul, within the soul, because andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam, he exists in every atom, every element, because he is smaller than the smallest. It's interesting that we are conscious of many things in life. And if someone touches me, I'm conscious that the person has touched me. And here I find that the black ants, they bite. It's unusual. In India, we find the black ant doesn't bite, but here the black ants bite. Has anyone observed that? And a couple of black ants I've seen at my property, and then when I was reading, suddenly a prick appears, and then I realize, oh, a black ant has bitten me. I'm aware of such a tiny living entity biting me, but I'm not aware of the Supreme Soul who conducts my sensual activity, who directs my sensual activity. Why is that I'm not aware of it? Because I have turned away from the Super Soul. What is that verse which talks about that we have turned away from Krishna? Anyone remembers? Which is that verse which talks about we have turned away from Krishna? Sorry? Yeah. Krishna bahir mukha hana bhoga vanchakare nikatastha mayatare japati adhare. So it says that Maya is waiting nearby, and as soon as we show a little interest, by just looking with interest in the material energy, Maya is not waiting for us to fall down, rather she will give fatak, a slap. So it's because we have turned away from Krishna, therefore we do not see, although he is in so proximity. And here it is said that Krishna is Maha Ishaya, the supreme controller. Where do you find this being picked up in Bhagavad Gita? Which is the chapter where Krishna talks about this? Anyone remembers? the individual is a tiny controller who knows about his own body, whereas the Lord is the Maha Ishaya, is the supreme controller. He knows the activities in all the living entities. Sorry? 13th chapter. Thank you, Mataji. So 13th chapter starts with the questions. Arjuna said, "Oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, Purusha, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Person of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." So one who knows this body where I am existing, then that person is called the knower of the body. But Krishna does not stop there. Krishna continues in the next verse and he says, "Kshetrajnanam cha api mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetre kshetrajnayor jnanam yattach jnanam matam mama." O Syana Bharata, you should understand that I am also a knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. This is my opinion. So therefore Krishna is saying that yes, you are a controller, implying you are a tiny controller, and you know somewhat, not all activities which are happening in your body. Some activities you seem to be knowing, but I am the super controller or super knower, and I know what is happening in every body. And then he continues that reign in that chapter, 13th chapter, and then he concludes in 13.23, "Upadhrastra anumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwaraha paramatmeti cha api ukto Dehesmin Purusha Paraha." So Maheshwaraha, that I am the transcendental supreme proprietor, and what do I do? Who exists as an overseer and permitter, as Upadhrasta and Anumantacha. I am overseeing and Anumanta, I am permitting. So unless the Lord permits, I can't even lift my hand. So we have in our body, we say that there are 3 layers of existence. We exist as a gross body. You can see that hands, legs, the whole body. And then there is a subtle body, which is the subtle body consists of mind, intelligence, false ego. And then we have the spiritual body. So in Sanskrit we say Sthula Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, and Adhyatmika Sharir. The gross body, the subtle body, and the spiritual body. So it's the subtle body or the Sukshma Shariram that the thinking, feeling, and willing happens. But how is that thinking, feeling, willing, subtle energy is able to move the gross body? So there is a connection. On one side you have the Adhyatmika Shariram, that is the spiritual body, and the other end you have the gross body, that is Sthula Shariram. But in between is the Sukshma Sharir. So gross body, spiritual body, and in between is the subtle body. But between the subtle body and the gross body is the prana. And that's where the soul exists in the 5 layers. Or the what are the 5 types of prana? You have the prana, apana, yam, those 5 parts. So in that 5 airs, at the neutral point, we said the vector is a soul existing. So what soul desires, Krishna permits as a super soul. And how does, when he gives the permission, what does he do? He activates the prana. When the prana is activated, it pushes the gross body. So therefore, the thinking, feeling, willing of the subtle body is understood by the super soul. When he approves it, then the prana is activated, and that prana pushes the gross body. And then only I can lift my arm or I can move my legs. It's a very wonderful science which is very difficult for an ordinary person to understand. That you have the spiritual body, you have the gross body, you have the subtle body, and between the subtle body and the gross body exists the prana, and it is this prana which is activated by the super soul, and then the gross body moves. Because the gross body is made up of the 5 elements, and these elements, they belong to the Supreme Lord. It's not mine. So unless He activates, unless He pushes, then the elements will not work. And where does this subtle body exist in our body? Where does it exist? Yes, Mataji, where does this... sorry? In the heart. I don't think... Yeah, in the brain is according to neurologists or the brain scientists, but not according to Vedic scientists. The soul is wrapped up within the subtle body, and you can't really pinpoint where exactly the subtle body is in this body. One can't say that subtle body exists only in the brain or anywhere in any part of the body. It is there all over because it's a subtle energy. Just as the gross body, you can't say where the elements exist. The bhumi, rapo, nalo, vayu, where does it exist in the gross body? It exists all over, everywhere. So similarly, the subtle energy also exists everywhere in the body, and it wraps up the soul. And when the soul is migrating from one body to the other body, it moves along with the subtle body, because Yamaraj, we have seen in Ajamil's pastime that when the Yamaduta, they throw the rope to pull the soul out of the body, obviously the rope is a material element, and that material element cannot touch the spirit soul, because spirit soul is transcendental, and hence the soul is pulled out of the body, gross body, by pulling the subtle body. Subtle body is material energy. The rope is also material energy. So that material energy pulls this material energy, and along with that, the soul is extracted from the body. So this concept of the prana activating the gross body because of the subtle energy's desire or because of the soul's desire can be thought of the pneumatic equipment. Those of you who are from engineering background, you have the mechanism, but either by use hydraulic pressure or the liquid pressure to push the elements, or you use the air pressure, which is called the pneumatic pressure, to push the elements. So here we find the prana pressure being used to activate the gross elements. And Prabhupada continues the analogy that it is the Paramatma, the Supreme Lord. He is present within to sanction the individual soul's desiring material enjoyment. So the desiring of material enjoyment, it continues from previous lifetimes. I think we have discussed this many times in the past, that we have the vritti, the series of thoughts. Based on that, I perform an activity or action that creates a samskara, and when that samskara is repeated, it becomes a vasana, and that vasana is stored in chitta, and then that chitta, when I get my next body, then Krishna makes the arrangement under the divine force that because the chitta stores all my desires, and Krishna looks at the eligibility. Accordingly, I get my next body. So therefore, I get the psychophysical body, that is the subtle body with the physical body. And because I'm given by under the direction of the divine force, I continue to act based on this svabhav I have, with which I am born. Because that svabhav is the desire stored in subconscious plane, in the chitta. And so we think that, well, I'm independent, I'm thinking, I'm working, but actually Krishna as a super soul, he knows what is there, our desire. So therefore, accordingly, my psychic nature has been given to me, and then I'm moving along the plane of my psychic nature only. And I'm thinking that I'm using my free will, but actually I'm being directed by the super soul, who is the friend who's sitting with me, says, well, this is your desire, accordingly I have given you the software, or accordingly I have given you this svabhav, and then you are functioning according to svabhav, and therefore you get what has been destined to you. And then how do we break that cycle? The only way to break that cycle is not to use your own svabhav, but to use borrowed svabhav, or we need to borrow the intelligence. And from where do I borrow the intelligence? I borrow the intelligence from Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. So when instead of functioning or instead of behaving according to my svabhav, if I start behaving according to borrowed intelligence, then my destination undergoes a change. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada says that when I'm clapping, although the lines they tend to say that these lines indicate my destiny, but as I clap in a Sankirtan movement, then we find the lines undergo a change, because I'm performing the Sankirtan not according to my desire, but I'm performing the Sankirtan according to Sadhu's, Guru, and Shastra. So it's a borrowed intelligence, and with that borrowed intelligence, my destination undergoes a change. And hence, you cannot predict the future of a devotee, because the lines are constantly changing. And I can give my own personal example. 5 years back, I was told that my lifespan is too short. I may leave the body any time. So that was an indication given to me by 2 astrologers. And you may say, my wife believes in astrology, and she said, let's wrap up ourselves and leave back to India. Let's go back to Holy Dham and start residing. So even if you leave, then your goal, your destiny would be better. But somehow the circumstances were created in the family in such that we couldn't move out of Melbourne, and I'm still alive, and I'm here on Vyasasana. Although in India they say that you go for pension, they'll ask you for a certificate to declare that you were alive last year. So here I'm alive and I'm taking the session. So what is the importance of Upadhrastra Anumantacha is that by understanding God is not the sole controller, we can avoid blaming Him when bad things happen, because I'm also a tiny controller. Otherwise, you say, anything bad happening in my life, it is because of the Lord, it's happening in my life. But because I'm also a tiny controller, I play a role in it, and hence I cannot blame Him. And by understanding that the Lord is the supreme controller, we can stay devoted to Him even during adversities. So it is a double-edged sword. As a tiny controller, when things are not working my way, I can take the blame, and then during adversity, I can still think of the Supreme Lord, because He is the supreme controller, that He would extricate me from the difficult situations. And with that faith, I can move forward on my spiritual journey, or I can move forward in my material journey. And Prabhupada gives the example from Madhvacharya that Yatha Rajagna Priyatvam tu Bhrithya Vedena Chatmanaha Tata Jivo Nayat Sakyam Vetti Tasmai Namostute. As the various servants in the different departments of big establishments cannot see the Supreme Managing Director under whom they are working, the conditioned souls cannot see the Supreme Friend sitting within their body. So just as in a big enterprise that the individuals cannot see the person at the top, they hardly get to see him, but still he is there. So similarly, the conditioned souls cannot see the Supreme Friend sitting within their bodies. However, still when we hear about the Supreme Friend through the Shastric injunction in a parampara, then what do? Let's offer our obeisances to that Maheshaya. Namaskaromi. We offer our obeisances. Yeah. Any question or comment before we move to today's? I think Mataji said Jagannath Babaji's disappearance day. No garland. Okay. So any comment or any question before we try to remember Jagannath Babaji. Yes, Prabhu. So, as I understand your question is, how does a jiva turn towards the Lord? Is that the question? There are two aspects to that. One, wonderful devotees who go on Sankirtan, they shower mercy, causeless mercy. They give it to the jivas outside by performing Sankirtan, by distributing prasadam, whatever, on, I think, Wednesdays and Fridays, I think, isn't it, Mataji? Wednesday and Fridays, the temple. Have you been any time, have you participated? Harinam. Now, how did you come in contact with Harinam? how did you come to temple, or how did you come to know that you should come to the temple and then associate with the activities happening in the temple? How did it happen to you? Sorry? But just now we said that from the previous life, I don't know what is happening. I forgot. And how is that something which has said to you from within made you to come to the temple? Isn't it? So the same thing can happen to others also. And that awareness is created, or the direction is given to a jiva by the mercy of devotees who spend who give their life, who give their time, who give their energy in spreading Krishna consciousness. So therefore, we should namaskaromi, offer your dandavas to those devotees who have brought you to path of Krishna consciousness. So Krishna chose an instrument, and through that instrument you have come to the temple. And never forget that person or that personality who brought you to the temple on the righteous path. So devotees go and then create that spiritual sukruti, we call it Ajnana Sukruti. Ajnana Sukruti is not on the material platform, but Ajnana Sukruti or the Bhakti Sukruti, which is given or created, and when that piles up to a maturity, you take to the righteous path. Or sometimes Prabhupada says that I have created the Sukruti for you. So a pure devotee can give you the Sukruti. And then you come under the shelter of the triangle, the sadhu, shastras and guru. Somehow you come in. If the soul desires, somehow Krishna makes the arrangement. And this is the true story of every devotee in the temple. Somehow the desire has sprung from within because the Sukruti was created, or the Sukruti happened by the mercy of devotees. Because bhakti is transcendental, and Bhakti Devi requires a medium, and that medium is a devotee. It is from bhakti, from the heart of a devotee, comes to another heart. Because she needs a medium. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I also wanted to know, like, we were given this birth because in the previous births, is it like that because of the previous desires, that's why we got this birth, because we could not completely eradicate the desires, that's why Lord made arrangement in the body. So
see, the jiva cannot be desireless. Prabhupada says that we cannot be without any desires, because it's only a stone can be, or an inert body can only be desireless. A living force will have the desire, but it's only, you have to change the nature of desire from being myself at the center to the Lord being at the center. If I can make that shift, that's a quantum shift in our consciousness. That person who has made that shift is the person who takes to the path of Krishna consciousness.
and they don't have to go through the cycle of
Yeah, by the process of Krishna consciousness, you are purifying the subtle body, or the desires are located in chitta, the subtle body. So when the subtle body is purified, then at the time of death, the subtle body evaporates. So it means that the process should eliminate the subtle body. When there is no subtle body, then the spirit soul returns back to the spiritual world. Because the gross body goes to the crematorium, the subtle body has been dissolved, and what is left is the spirit soul that returns back to the spiritual world. Yeah? Hare Bol. maybe we'll spend only a few minutes because it's 10 to 9 and I'm aware of the time factor, especially when Priya Mataji is sitting in the audience. She says that, Prabhu, you are crossing the time limit. 9 o'clock, the class should end. I hope all of us can identify Jagannath Das Babaji. Is Jagannath Babaji there? Where is he? He's there on the altar. Yeah, thank you. So this is the prayer normally offered to Jagannath Babaji. Gaura virbhava bhumestvam nirdeshta saijana priyaha Vaishnava sarva bhaumaha Sri Jagannathaya te namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to Jagannath Babaji Maharaj, who is respected by the entire Vaishnava community and who discovered the place where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. So if we have to thank any personality for confirming the exact place of birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then the credit goes to Jagannath Babaji. It is said that in history, when Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he was trying to discover the actual place of birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then in Navadip Dham, I think Nava is 9 islands. So every island, the persons would say that, no, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared in our place, in this place. So they would narrate the, we call Sthala Purana, or the local history. That local history, what they have heard from the previous generations. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was in a state of confusion because wherever he went, wherever he traveled, everyone would say that this is the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared. And he wanted a confirmation, and then he requests his spiritual master, Siksha Guru, Jagannath Das Babaji. And at that time, Jagannath Babaji, what was his age? Almost 140 years. We are not talking of 60, 70, or 10, 20. He was almost 140 years, coiled like a small baby, and hardly could see anything because his eyelids cover his eyes. So for him to see anything, his 2 disciples from the 2 sides would lift his eyelid, only then he could see. And that's how he would offer the bhoga, or that's how he would offer his obeisance to the Lord. So that old was he. But when he was brought by his servant on a basket to the place where Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, is this the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance? From that basket, Jagannath Babaji jumps out of it and starts dancing in ecstasy. And he said, this is the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared. And it says that when he started dancing, he was dancing like a lion, roaring and dancing, and he stretched his body to about 6 feet in length. So you can imagine an elderly person coiled like a small, tiny baby, and such a person who could hardly walk because he was being carried by his personal servant in a basket. But the moment he came to the place where he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, then he jumps out of the basket and starts dancing in ecstasy. So therefore, it is said that who discovered the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. It is said that he was born around 1780 AD in a place called Tangel district and what is called today Bangladesh. There are others also who say that he appeared in some other adjoining place, but this is the info I could get from Stephen Prabhu from his website. And said that Baldev Vidya Bhushan had a disciple named Uddhava Das. I think all of you know that who Baldev Vidyabhushan is. Or Baldev Vidyabhushan is the Acharya, the disciple of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, and he re-establishes the credentials of Gaudiya Sampradaya, where he had to discuss, debate with the other Sampradaya and to defeat them. So he wrote the commentary. What it is called the, sorry? Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, yeah. And then his famous Bhagavad Gita book also, and Srila Prabhupada dedicates his Bhagavad Gita as it is to Baldev Vidyabhushan. So he had a disciple called Uddhava Das, and his disciple was Sri Madhusudana Das Babaji, who lived in a place called Surya Kund in Vrindavan. And Madhusudana Das Baba's disciple was Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. So that is the chain. And Jagannath Das Babaji was the spiritual master of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. And Bhaktivedanta Thakur is the, you can say, he brought the Renaissance within the movement, who re-established the Gaudiya Sampradaya. There are many pastimes which are spoken about Jagannath Babaji, but we'll just pick up only one or two because of the time factor. We've already said that how Jagannath Babaji was responsible for identifying the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu birth. And it's also said that Jagannath Babaji, he used to receive a lot of donations by people, from disciples, others who would come, because he was an exalted devotee and highly knowledgeable. He was considered to be a Rasika devotee, and he would do bhajans throughout the night. So devotees or the local area residents would come and give a lot of money. And what would he do? He said that go and buy rasgullas and other sweets and give it to cows and other living entities. They said, why not to the, why only to the dogs and cows? He said they are all dhamvasis. They should be given. It is better to give them than the pseudo-vasis of, because these people are involved in activities which are against the Vedic injunction. So it's better to give to the other living entities than to these people. It is also said that Jagannath Das Babaji met Bhaktivedanta Thakur for the first time in 1880 AD, and the second meeting took place sometime in 1891, that is after a decade. And then they discuss extensively the Krishna Katha, and it is said that when Jagannath Das Babaji left the planet, out of compassion for all the conditioned souls, Jagannath Babaji transferred his power of bhajan, his knowledge of the Shastra and Prema Bhakti directly into the heart of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So he empowered, in one sense, Bhaktivedanta Thakur to continue the Gaudiya movement. And Jagannath Babaji's, he gave a couple of instructions to everyone. One, you must avoid men who associate with women, or with a man who in any way associates with a man who associates with a woman. So do not associate with a person who associates with other women. That's the first instruction. Two, to realize the supreme goal of life, you must repeat Harinam regularly and steadfastly. So you should chant regularly and steadfastly. Steadiness is so important that it must be maintained even at the cost of one's own life. So it's important that we maintain the steadiness of Krishna consciousness even at the expense of one's own life. 3. Never forget Gaura, who is more merciful and benevolent than Krishna. This is the third instruction, that never forget Lord Gauranga. Why? Because Krishna is just like a ruler who takes into account your offenses in his administration of justice, whereas Gaura does not take your offenses into account. He is so merciful. So therefore we call him as Mahavadanyaya. Where Krishna is more interested in the dispensation of justice, Gaura is more interested in the distribution of mercy. So therefore, Gaura Kirtana is more useful than Krishna Kirtana. And hence Gaura Kirtana means Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta. So therefore we find the temple, some devotees, they try to repeat this line more often than the Hare Krishna itself. And finally, Krishna is the avatar of Dwapara Yuga, and we are not living in Dwapara Yuga. Gaura is the Kali Yuga avatar. So therefore, we should sing the name and glories of avatar in whose age we are living. Gauranga has appeared in our lifetime, Krishna has appeared in a previous yuga. So why should you pick up previous yuga's avatar? Why not pick up this yuga's avatar? So therefore, just as in the kingdom we praise the ruling king, and therefore, Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari. It is said that in Krishna Leela, Babaji was Rasika Manjari. Anyone knows about Rasika Manjari? Madhu Manjari must be knowing about Rasika Manjari. No? Okay. So it is said that Babaji left he wound up his pastime on Monday, the February 25th, 1895. So he was 1780 to 1895. So that shows how many years? Mataji? 1895 to 1780. 105 years. So 115. So there is some calculation, the way they have given the age factor, there seems to be some discrepancy. But what we know is he has lived for a very, very, very long life to bless this planet, because such souls are extremely, extremely rare to traverse this planet. Jagannath Baba Ji ki Jai. Grandharaj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki Jai. All glories to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji. Yes, Mother. Yeah, see, what you said is true. We say that Mahavadanyaya, because Gauranga is so merciful, you take the shelter of Lord Gauranga, he'll ignore your faults and shower his mercy. Whereas Krishna will not ignore your fault. So therefore, take shelter of Gauranga, who will give you the shelter of Lord Krishna. Yes, but first when you take Gauranga's lotus feet, then you take Krishna's lotus feet. Because in India, you find that everyone knows Krishna, but they hardly take shelter of Krishna. The entire 1 billion population knows about Krishna. But how many of them have seriously taken the shelter of Krishna? It's only after Gauranga's appearance that people have come to know about Krishna and they've seriously taken shelter of Krishna. So therefore, first take Gauranga's shelter, and who would take us to Krishna's shelter?
There is a good point, please forgive me for insisting, but according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, we know that those who take shelter of Chaitanya, Lord is speaking of Lord Chaitanya, they please him. And the way to please him and take his blessings is following his instructions, just find the names of Krishna. Whenever who wants to glorify, chant Gauranga, Gauranga, and God, Lord Chaitanya was closing his eyes, covering his ears. No, he didn't want to that. He was very upset. So to please Lord Gauranga, that's the way how we take shelter of him. That means chanting the names of Krishna with his blessings. That's the only way how, the authorized way, how we take shelter.
Yes, Mother, we should understand the mood of Jagannath Babaji. When he is giving this instruction, it means that he knows all this, and yet he is giving that instruction. It implies that you please take shelter of Lord Gauranga. He'll take you to the Parampadam, that he will guide you, he'll show you the path, and you travel that path. This is the instruction he has given, so this instruction can be interpreted by the Acharyas, and when we see the interpretation of Acharyas, obviously what you said is the interpretation of that line. Isn't it? Because this is what we find the instruction of Jagannath Babaji to many of his disciples. These are the 4 lines, I believe, this is what he has given.
Again, we should must be careful the way how we convey these messages, because many people can be confused. So that's my humble request to you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Mother. Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.